Thank you very much, Mark. And thank you, Friars, for inviting me to speak to you today about the great Saint John Henry Newman. We are just 6 days away from the feast day of Newman, which is October 9th, chosen because that was the day he entered the Catholic Church in 1845. So this feast day will mark the 180th year since Newman entered the church. Today is day 3 of an annual novena to Newman, and I would encourage you all, if you know the Cardinal Newman Society, to go to that site or search Newman Novena, and there's a lovely prayer and set of reflections each day leading up to his feast day, and I will just read the prayer for today, or the intention for today, which is on parents as educators, the primary educators of their children. For parents, that God give them the grace as primary educators and witnesses to the sanctity of marriage and family, to form their children in truth and virtue, that parents might find suitable options for faithful Catholic education, and that parents of confused or wayward children might persevere in hope and prayer, comforted in the mercy of God and his love for lost sheep. Again, Cardinal Newman Society, a wonderful organization that vets and not quite accredits, but gives a seal of approval to Orthodox, authentic Catholic education at the college and now at the high school and grade school level. And we hope will do so for Santiago Trade School soon. In 29 days, St. John Henry Newman will be declared the 38th Doctor of the Universal Church. Pope Leo XIV will officially proclaim him on All Saints' Day, which is also the end of a novena for Catholic education. So we'll talk about this a little later. I don't know what title Newman will have as doctor, but if it's not related to education in some way, I'll be quite surprised. So I just wanted to do 3 things in this talk. First, to introduce you to or refamiliarize you with this great saint. Second, to review the qualities that the church seeks in its doctors, which is also to say its universal teachers, its greatest teachers of doctrine, its greatest examples of teaching and forming youth and Catholic laity especially. And then thirdly, to give you some sense of why Newman is the perfect teacher and doctor for our time. And I'll show that through what numerous popes have said about him over the past 146 years. So let's begin with a prayer by Newman from his very personal Meditations on Christian Doctrine. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. This is hope in God, Creator. God knows me and calls me by name. God has created me to do him some definite service. He has committed some work to me which he has not committed to another. I have my mission. I never may know it in this life, but I shall be told it in the next. Somehow I am necessary for his purposes. I have a part in this great work. I am a link in a chain, a bond of connection between persons. He has not created me for naught. I shall do good. I shall do his work. I shall be an angel of peace, a preacher of truth in my own place, while not intending it, if I do but keep his commandments and serve him in my calling. Therefore, I will trust him, wherever I am. I can never be thrown away. If I am in sickness, my sickness may serve him. In perplexity, my perplexity may serve him. If I am in sorrow, my sorrow may serve him. He does nothing in vain. He knows what he is about. He may take away my friends. He may throw me among strangers. He may make me feel desolate, make my spirit sink, hide the future from me. Still, he knows what he is about. Amen. St. John Henry Newman. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. In founding, just a little bit about myself, in founding my nonprofit called Adeodatus, to support the renewal of Catholic liberal education, as well as Catholic culture, I took Newman's hope as our own. That is, to be a link in a chain and a bond of connection between persons. We are a religious nonprofit, again, supporting the ongoing renewal of Catholic education and culture. And we do that through conferences and forums, national conferences so far on the West Coast and the East Coast, and we'll do a third one at the Augustine Institute in St. Louis in 2027. We also did a Tolkien forum this past January in Pasadena. We have a book series called the Adeodatus series on Catholic education and culture, and we will soon have a couple more series with, we have 3 books published right now, and there are at least 50 in the pipeline. So we are trying to bring back the great books in a collected way for the sake of Catholic education and formation. And then we are launching the Adeodatus Catholic Culture Institute, which will be a Catholic culture building institute, an immersive 1-year program in the history of Catholic culture from Alexandria in the desert all the way up to Los Angeles and the new evangelization. Also, East Coast, West Coast, the New World evangelization. So we will do that both with local groups and as a national program. I know the power of the bond of connection that Newman speaks of because in coming to know and love Newman, I did that through a teacher who knew and loved him. Don Briel's bond of connection to Newman became mine through my bond of connection to Don. I dedicate this talk to the memory and in petition for the intercession and guidance of this greatest of my mentors. He was the founder of the Catholic Studies movement and the first holder of the John Henry Newman Chair in Catholic Studies at the University of Mary in North Dakota. Here is Don less than a week before he died. He had 2 forms of leukemia, either one of which could have been treated, but not both. And as you see, gathered around him are a priest, a number of nuns, and his daughter, and myself. His students came through in these weeks that he was given to live, and they are the fruit of his work. That order, which is called the Handmaids of the Heart of Jesus, they are in Bishop Barron's diocese in Winona, Rochester, Minnesota, and they help rural priests in the upper Midwest. And ideally, that will be expanding to Montana, Idaho, Utah, and everywhere where priests are stretched thin. So Mother Mary Clare up in the upper left-hand corner is the Mother Superior and founder of that order. So that's just some of the fruits of Don's work. And I came to know Catholic culture and the wonder of Newman's work for us through him. And I would say this founding of Catholic Studies, which is at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, it has had about 10% vocations out of its student body over a long period of time. And I think when you found something that is real and authentic Catholic culture, you are going to get that. You are going to get that. You get that from Thomas Aquinas College over 60 plus years now. Over 10% of the students have become nuns or religious. You get that from Wyoming Catholic. You get that everywhere that there is faithful witness to the truths of the faith in a community. And so these friendships, mine with Don, the sisters with Don, the priests with Don, those were embodied sacramental formations in the intellectual, moral, and religious virtues. And that is what Newman was dedicated to. And I'll just give you 2 little quotations before we go into his life that show this. So this is from The Rise and Progress of Universities. I say then that the personal influence of the teacher is able in some sort to dispense with an academical system. But that the system cannot in any way dispense with personal influence. With influence there is life. Without it, there is none. And here is his part of his view on how truth is propagated, which is what Catholic culture is, the propagation of truth from one generation to the next through education and formation, starting in the family, moving into the schools, and then into the next generation of family formation. Truth has been upheld in the world not as a system, not by books, not by argument, nor by temporal power, but by the personal influence of those who are at once the teachers and the patterns of it. So that is what Newman was dedicated to. That's what his life was about, and he was that kind of pattern of love of the truth and love of his fellow man in Christ. So here's 2 pages on the highlights of his life. He lived almost to 90 years old. He was born in 1801 in London, and he spent the first 44 years of his life as an Anglican. He went to Oxford at 16 years old, and eventually passed. He had some difficulty there, and we'll go into that. It was the source of his first conversion, or the moment of his first conversion. And then came back strong and was elected Fellow of Oriel College and then tutor of Oriel College. And he became the greatest preacher of modern times as vicar of St. Mary's Church, the University Church of Oxford. And those Anglican sermons that he gave before 1845 were as Catholic as anything, and the ones afterwards were even more fully so. In 1845, he gave all of that up and became a priest and an Oratorian, entered the church in 1845 on October 9th, and then became the founder and rector of the first oratory of St. Philip Neri in Birmingham, England. So he was the rector of that oratory. Then in 1851, bishops asked him to start a university in Dublin, Catholic University in Dublin. That didn't work out, but he learned a lot about that, about education and its practical planning and development, and eventually published The Idea of a University, which is his most well-known book, I believe, up to this point. Very influential in Catholic education even now. Then parents at the oratory in Birmingham asked him to start a school, which he did in 1859. He was created a cardinal 20 years later, and then died 11 years after that at the oratory. So let's go more deeply into his work. And I'm drawing from an exhibit that we are bringing, that was created in Oxford in 2010 for the beatification of Newman, which took place in Birmingham. Pope Benedict came and did that beatification. And I don't have them all here yet today, but we'll get them to Orange County soon. We'll have 24 banners that tell his life and then also celebrate this moment of his proclamation as the 38th Doctor of the Church. So we already have, this will be in the Cathedral of Los Angeles. It will be in the Cathedral of San Francisco. It will be it's already being shipped to the Augustine Institute in St. Louis right now. It'll be at Benedictine College in Kansas, Belmont Abbey in North Carolina, and we hope in as many or more than 100 different Catholic cathedrals, cultural centers, etc. So this image is from one of the banners that starts it off. The whole exhibit is called The Certainty of Newman, Conscience and Reality. And there is a book that goes with this that's being reprinted by our Sunday Visitor right now, but we don't have it done yet. So this will join the exhibit at some point. This is an expanded version of his life and work. So when Pope Benedict XVI visited England in 2010, the most important thing on his agenda was this beatification. And he framed all of his thought about Newman in terms of Newman's 3 conversions. And his words were, I should like to recall, this is much later, he went back to this many times in different addresses to different groups. This is Pope Benedict. I should like to recall once more the beatification of Cardinal John Henry Newman. Why was he beatified? What does he have to say to us? We must learn from Newman's 3 conversions because they were steps along a spiritual path that concerns us all. He will say at another time that Newman is the quintessential modern man. He had to go through a kind of rationalism, skepticism, to an increasing conversion to reality and to the truth of the Catholic faith. And he did that in a way that caused him great suffering, but brought him the pearl of great price. So from his earliest memories, Newman always had the unshakable certainty of 2 and only 2 luminously self-evident beings. He was always aware of God and himself, all through his life. That's his first memory, knowing that there is a God and knowing that he was God's creature, which is rather extraordinary. But as he was approaching the age of 15, he had kind of slipped into a rationalism and even a relativism of the day, which is completely understandable, how much the forces of the culture affect people, especially young people. We see it today. And at the time of this age 15, his father's bank went under, and he got tremendously sick. He had a first of 3 illnesses which correspond to his 3 conversions. And at this point, the conversion is to faith in the living God. Until that moment, Newman had thought, like the average man, who considers God as something uncertain, something with no essential role to play in his life. In other words, he found a creed. He found the creed of evangelicalism, which carried him for a good part of his life. It was not enough in the end, and he had to keep going towards greater and greater reality. But this is the first moment that he is turned back to God, away from rationalism, if you will. So then he went off to Oxford at age 16. This was his college, Trinity College. That's the quad. Each college has its own quad. This is called the Garden Quad, though I don't see much of a garden. And this was the chapel that he would have preached. He wouldn't have preached in here, but he would have worshipped in here. But at the time, just think of the anti-Catholicism in England. It's extraordinary. It's deep. It ends up causing him to leave Oxford when he becomes Catholic. There would not have been candles, and there would not have been an altar. It would have only been the pulpit in the middle of the chapel, because the sacramentals were not welcome at that time. So no crucifix, no candles. After being exiled for decades, Trinity did honor him, and so you can see him in the dining room of Trinity College, and they did put a bust up in the gardens at this point. Newman, as I mentioned, almost failed his exams due to the second severe illness of his life that corresponded to the second conversion that he underwent. But he offered all of that up and moved forward and became a tutor and a fellow at Oriel College, one of the most difficult jobs to obtain in all of England, probably all of academic world, and also became the select preacher at St. Mary's, the university church. So he was the preacher, if you will, to all of England, and through his writings, really to all of the Catholic world once he converted. And his sermons were so powerful that hearers thought that they heard Christ for the first time through his words. He packed this church, and he gave long sermons that engaged them fully for as long as he would preach. So here is the ambo from which he preached in that church, and they did actually put up a medallion to honor him, which is, for a long time that wouldn't have happened because he was in the end a traitor. And then this was his home. He lived on that. You see the bay window on the left side. That's the back of the chapel. And then his rooms were those windows just to the right on that second floor. This college, by the way, was founded in 1326. We celebrate 150 years and think it's a big number. Oxford is a medieval institution. And then this is the door that came from Newman's rooms into the back of the chapel. It was a broom closet when he arrived, and this is what he did with it. He set up his own chapel at the back of Oriel Chapel, and people could see the lights, the candles on at all hours. Newman was an extremely holy and devout man who would take the difficulties of the day and pray long into the night. Above the arch here, and sorry for the resolution, but above there you see the Newman's motto, which is cor ad cor loquitur, which means heart speaks to heart. And that fits with what we started with, the personal influence, the friendship that Newman was devoted to with all of his tutors and all of his students, his colleagues, his tutor colleagues, and his, as a pastor, his flock. So he carried that job out very faithfully for a long time, lived that priesthood as a pastoral and educational mission. And then Oxford even, this is a set of stained glass windows this is just opposite of that altar, his private chapel. And this tells his life. And this is actually a beautiful tribute. When my wife and I were there with our youngest daughter this summer, we prayed Newman's great prayer, Lead Kindly Light, with an Oxford friend in this chapel. Newman, as I said, this time period corresponded to a second illness and a second conversion. And this is in 1833 now. So he's 32 years old and just pretty close to Christ's age when he is set on the path that will lead directly to the Catholic Church 12 years later. So he realized the limits of evangelicalism, and through years of conversations with fellows and students, through his pastoral work, and through his discovery of the church fathers, he came to move further towards reality. At this time, during a trip to the Mediterranean and visiting Rome, he fell gravely ill and almost died in Sicily. And when he was recovering and on the boat back to England, that's when he wrote Lead Kindly Light, and this is the time of his second conversion. That second step is one of overcoming a subjective, evangelicalism as a personal feeling. So he'd had a creed, but the creed was very emotional, very personal. Now he's moving towards a universal creed in the universal church. At this time, his work, and as he felt it, his recovery meant that God was telling him, he heard the voice of God saying, you have a work to do in England. And that work is the Oxford Movement, which is a series of, it ends up being 90 tracts, small writings up to long ones, which are called Tracts for the Times. He's addressing the English people, the Anglican Church, and trying to read with friends the 39 articles that are at the heart of the Anglican Confession as Catholic. He believes that they are not Protestant, that the Anglican Church is not a Protestant church, that it is a middle ground between the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Church. And he ends up reading the 39 articles. By the time he gets to tract 90, he writes that, and that causes all sorts of, that's when he gets labeled a traitor. And he cannot survive that and ends up having to leave Oxford and everything that he loved. In this path, he is rejecting the liberalism of the day and moving from, again, feeling and opinion towards universal truth. As he put it later in his acceptance speech as cardinal, liberalism in religion is the doctrine that there's no positive truth in religion, but that one creed is as good as another. whatever you fancy. It's believable because you believe it, and it is true because it is your truth. This is what he fought, and it's really the battle that we still fight, and it's part of why Benedict XVI recommended him so strongly for sainthood, as well as prepared the way for being named Doctor of the Church. This was that last tract, remarks on certain passages in the 39 Articles. That is what caused the end of the Oxford movement, or the Tractarian movement, and also the end of his career at Oxford, and the movement directly into the church and ordination as a Catholic priest. So he found that a mere theory wouldn't work. He needed the reality of the sacraments, and he needed the fullness of the Catholic communion. A certain phrase of St. Augustine's, when it was brought to his attention, caught him. This phrase, securus judicat orbis terrarum. The universal church judges with certainty. That is what he came to. He understood the church as a living body, and one that develops, it may be corrupted but renewed, as her divine nature gives her human manifestation, the spirit of renewal and life, and the certainty of doctrine throughout any corruption or waywardness. So this third conversion to Catholicism required him to give up almost everything that was dear to him: his friends, his family, Oxford, which he loved so much. It had been his life since age 16. He gave that up. That was the loss, and the gain was the pearl of great price. As Newman famously, there was one last thing that he had to get rid of, and that was the stain on his imagination of anti-Catholicism. He did feel, he did say, he did think that the church was the Antichrist. That was what he was taught, and that was what he had absorbed as a young Anglican, and it still haunts the Protestant church. Some have made greater strides against that than others, but Newman had to work against that himself. So he had to renew his imagination and get rid of that prejudice, which is not easy. As he famously wrote, "To live is to change, and to be perfect is to have changed often." This last conversion was the greatest change, and his arrival at the true home that he would spend the rest of his life coming to know and love ever more deeply, like a discovery that his prejudice was unfounded and the joy that he was wrong. So he came into a port after a rough sea, with a path where reason and affection are united, and where obedience to a creed that he could fully embrace became easy to him. That's the easy yoke. So as that stain of anti-Catholicism receded, Newman began to see sanctity where he had seen only superstition in the Catholic. Like when he went to Italy, he saw the pieties as superstitions, the cult of saints, the relics, etc. And he had to overcome that prejudice. So what he came to see was that sanctity was the great sign of reality for the Catholic Church. And having suffered so much for that, then he moves to first to ordination, and then to found the Birmingham Oratory, and serving as his first rector. Again, later he's asked to, in 1851, to oversee the founding of the Catholic University in Dublin. Did not work, but the idea of a university came out of that. And what really sustained him was the certainty of being part of a real church, a living body, a sacramental church, a fully sacramental church, with all the difficulties that came with it. It wasn't easy for him he was suspected by the Anglicans when he was an Anglican, and then he was suspected by the Catholics when he became a Catholic. partially because of his doctrine of conscience, and partly because of his idea of the development of doctrine, which is not an easy thing to think of. If you think doctrine, you believe in a true creed, but there is development of doctrine, even such a thing as the Trinity had to be developed out of the Bible in the first 400 years of theological reflection. So this is one of the things that people think of when they think of Newman, that if he's asked to toast to the Pope, he'll say yes, but first I'll toast to conscience. And what he means by that is that conscience is, in the true sense of the word, the voice of God in us. And the Pope, he himself and the Pope and everyone else are secondary to that voice of God that's given into the heart, written on the heart of every human. So yes, to the Pope, if you please, still to conscience first, and the Pope afterwards. That has been used badly by some over time, but understanding it properly, it is a thoroughly orthodox position. So the final years of Newman's life are marked by being elevated to the cardinalate, being freed from all sorts of prejudice against him, and being accepted finally as the church looked on him as an example of faith. Here he is in his portrait as a cardinal. So that's his life, and that's a long introduction, but I hope it gives you a sense of his wisdom, his holiness, his docility, his humility, his openness to follow the truth wherever it leads him. So now he was Cardinal Newman, then saint, and now doctor. Let's look at the doctors very quickly. This is the book that went into the dicastery. This is the same dicastery that handles canonizations, the dicastery for the cause of saints. It also goes to the dicastery of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, but it's the same teams that looked at whether he should be a saint, look at whether he should be a doctor. And my friend Paul Shrimpton put this together with a number of American Newman scholars and brought it to the Vatican under Pope Francis. Pope Francis approved it, and one of the early things that Pope Leo did was to announce this acceptance and declaration of Newman as a doctor. So what does it take to be a doctor of the church? Doctor means teacher. Doctrine is teaching, and the official title is Doctor Ecclesiae Universalis, Doctor of the Universal Church. It's given for significant contribution to theology or teaching through research, study, or writing, and it's marked by three characteristics: eminent learning and teaching, eminens doctrina, a high degree of sanctity, insignis vitae sanctitas, and the declaration by the church. Just a quick history here. Doctors weren't named until 1298 under Pope Boniface. And at that time, he named the four great doctors of the West and the four great doctors of the East. So you have Ambrose, Augustine, Jerome, and Gregory the Great in the West. And then you have Athanasius, the great battler against the Pelagians, St. Basil, Gregory Nazianzen, and John Chrysostom, the great writer of the Byzantine liturgy. So those 8 doctors were the doctors of the church from 1298 to 1568. Then Thomas Aquinas was named doctor by Pius V. And then there are a number, we'll skip ahead to Pope Paul VI naming Teresa of Avila and Catherine of Siena the first women doctors, and now there are 5, and a sixth is under consideration, Sister Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, or Edith Stein, and that may, who knows, that may happen soon. The most recent additions were Gregory of Narek, about whom I know absolutely nothing, and Saint Irenaeus of Lyon. And Irenaeus is unique in that there was never a martyr named as a doctor before Irenaeus. And there's a reason for that. martyrdom is higher than doctor. So in a sense, being named, and this is why Thomas More has never been named a doctor, because his honor was to have his head cut off by Henry. That is his greatest witness to the church. So I kind of doubt we're going to see another martyr. I don't know why Irenaeus was named. He already had sainthood and martyrdom, but so it is. And then these are the most recent doctors, and you'll notice that they have titles. Not everybody gets a title, but many doctors, and especially recently. So Anthony of Padua is the evangelical doctor, Lawrence of Brindisi, apostolic, St. Teresa of Avila, the doctor of prayer. Catherine of Siena doesn't have a title, but look at St. Teresa of Lisieux on her 100th anniversary, the doctor of confidence. I did not know that. That is a very interesting title for Therese. St. Hildegard, Sibyl of the Rhine, and St. John of Avila, Apostle of Andalusia, and then these two most recent, Irenaeus was named Doctor of Unity, and St. Gregory did not get a title. So what will John Henry Newman be named? Will he get a title? I don't know. I did know about the naming ahead of time because of my friend's work on this, but he doesn't have any advance notice of what Leo will actually pronounce. But any of these and a number of others could be. Newman was so versatile and so important in so many areas that Doctor of Conscience that's, I think, the most likely thing. Doctor of Friendship would be beautiful. He is the great proponent of consulting the laity, the faithful, on matters of doctrine, and wrote a whole treatise on that. So Doctor of the Laity that'd be perfectly appropriate too. Doctor of Development sounds a little too much like fundraising, so I don't think that's going to happen. But the development of doctrine, very important. Doctor of Assent, he wrote the Grammar of Assent, which helped understand how we come to know something without 100% certainty, where we can be confident that something is true. So, for instance, you can say your experience will not have shown you a black swan in all likelihood, and your experience will not have shown you that England is an island because you didn't walk all the way around England and measure it and see that it was an island. But you are right to be confident that it is an island, even though you personally haven't verified that. So assent is very important to an age of skepticism and relativism, what Benedict called the dictatorship of relativism. So he could also be the doctor of emergent probabilities or of the illative sense, but we won't get into those. But all of those could be very nicely said about him. And now just a few slides on what the popes have said about Newman and why he is a perfect doctor for our time, someone you should invoke his intercession for any kind of uncertainties, doubts, difficulties, and for friendship, frankly. So this is Pius XII. He gave up his whole life to the truth. All his efforts, all his untiring labors were dedicated to that end. Paul VI, Newman, guided solely by love of the truth and fidelity to Christ, traced an itinerary, a path, the most toilsome but also the greatest, the most meaningful, the most conclusive that human thought has ever traveled during the last century. Indeed, one might say during the modern era, to arrive at the fullness of wisdom and peace. That's a beautiful sentiment. John Paul II, he combined fidelity to the truth with an attitude of respect and receptivity to the ideas and testimony of those with whom he disagreed. And Benedict, he was a man whose whole life was a journey in which he allowed himself to be transformed by truth in a search marked by great sincerity and great openness, so as to know better and to find and accept the path that leads to true life. Benedict again, in our day when intellectual moral relativism threatens to sap the very foundations of our society, Newman reminds us that as men and women made in the image and likeness of God, we were created to know the truth, to find in that truth our ultimate freedom and the fulfillment of our deepest human aspirations. In a word, we are meant to know Christ, and Newman helps us to do that. He taught that the conscience is the echo of God's voice, John Paul, and conscience means the capacity for truth, Benedict XVI, to know that in all areas of life, religious, moral, intellectual. The truth is all that matters to him. And Benedict XVI, again, the idea of a university holds up an ideal from which all those engaged in academic formation can continue to learn. We must encourage that synthesis between the intellect and moral discipline and religious commitment, which Newman proposed in the idea of a university. Paul VI, we can derive much profit from being imbued with the profound views of the essay on development of doctrine as organic development of church teaching. And Benedict, Benedict regarded his teaching on the development of doctrine as well as his doctrine on conscience as his decisive contribution to the renewal of theology. Paul VI, Newman, with all his heart devoted to the light of truth, today becomes an ever brighter beacon for all who are seeking an informed orientation and sure guidance amid the uncertainties of the modern world, which he saw prophetically. And this, I think, is we'll close with this summary papal declaration, which Pope Leo will supersede. Benedict again. The characteristic of the great doctor of the Church is that he teaches not only through his thought and speech, but also by his life. Because within him, thought and life are interpenetrated and defined. If this is so, then Newman belongs to the great teachers of the Church, because he both touches our hearts and enlightens our thinking. And if you want to go further and read more about Newman, this biography by Ian Kerr, Father Ian Kerr, is the definitive biography. And he was such a great author that he did it for Chesterton too, which is extraordinary. Here are my friend Paul Shrimpton's books on Newman. The Making of Men is the first, and then Catholic Eton, that's a study of Newman's school at Birmingham. And then he also wrote about Hans and Sophie Scholl, who used Newman to resist the Nazi, to form the resistance to the Nazis in Germany. And there are hundreds of schools named for Sophie all over Germany now. She's a really important figure that not a lot of people know about. This is our own series of books. Words Made Flesh, The Sacramental Mission of Catholic Education is our first. The Adeodatus Handbook on Catholic Education and Culture, and you can't really see it, but your speaker from last month, Father Bob Spitzer, is one of my contributors there. And we were just in Washington, D.C. together at a conference last weekend, and I told him I was going to do this talk and I was going to try to speak longer than he does, which is, as you know, Father Bob, I've always, he brings the Holy Spirit and it doesn't, and he keeps going. And Dale Ahlquist, the president of the Chesterton Society, called that book that we just did a monumental and profound contribution to the revival of Catholic education. So, and then finally, we have Truth on Trial coming out, which is the story of John Senior, if you've ever heard of the Integrated Humanities program at the University of Kansas. We are reprinting that story. And then this will be, Paul Shrimpton will do 2 books on Newman for us. This will be the first, Heart to Heart, Mind to Mind, St. John Henry Newman on Education for Educators. That'll be the first of 2 volumes. So thanks again for this opportunity to share my love of Newman with all of you, and I hope this creates or deepens your bond with this great saint and now doctor of the Church. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes. I've always had this bias against the Anglican Church because it was founded by a corrupt king.
Yes.
How can anybody join a church that's based on a corrupt king that wanted to marry the wife of his brother?
Okay, good. Excellent question, and there are some developments in England that are rather extraordinary. The Duchess of Kent was just buried at this cathedral, Winchester Cathedral. King Charles attended that. King Charles is writing a foreword to a book on Newman that's coming out by a friend of Paul's. There is a good possibility, and I would just watch for this and pray for this, that there will be more conversions. Duchess of Kent was the first Catholic in 300 years in the royal family. And I think there are going to be more. And I would not be surprised if Charles gave up the title of head of the church. Because, as you say, it is, it's an abomination. It's a ridiculous thing, and it should be given up. And there are more Catholics in England now than Anglicans. So this is not, and that's not I don't mean to oversell that, because that's the Anglicans falling faster than the Catholics have, but it has shifted, and it is ripe, as is France, for a true renewal. And my friend Paul, I'll just give you I don't know if so Mary was never canceled from Oxford. Mary is everywhere in Oxford. And we were doing this tour with Paul Shrimpton, my wife and daughter and I, and he just kept saying, "Our Lady's watching this place. Our Lady's watching this place everywhere you look." So I tried to capture that as much as I can. So I think pray for England, pray for France. That is where the renewal will happen in Europe.
Two questions. Adeodatus, what does that mean?
Adeodatus, and thank you, I should have said, Adeodatus was the son of Augustine, St. Augustine's bastard son, if you will. Adeodatus was a holy and brilliant young man about whom there is a dialogue that Augustine wrote with him, De Magistro. He died at age 16. Just after Augustine and Adeodatus were baptized together, with St. Monica watching, and then St. Monica died, and then Adeodatus died, and then his father died, and this was Monica's great work. Augustine was the son of her tears, and she cried for him for so long. And as Augustine said about Adeodatus, I take only credit for the sin of his creation, my part in that. Everything, God gave him everything good, and he would have been possibly a greater thinker than Augustine, because he was pure. And so I don't know why there's never been a cause for his sainthood, but it's probably because it wasn't well known, and Augustine probably didn't promote it. So,
is there an etymology to?
Oh, it's given by God. Yeah, gift of God or given by God. Yeah, and there have been 2 popes Adeodatus, and there are saints named Adeodatus, but not this one. Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I should always say that.
This second question.
Yeah.
Regarding John Henry Newman. I don't know if the story is true, but I heard upon his death he had wanted his remains to be buried in such a way that there would be nothing left. Is that true, and why was that?
That is true, but I happen to be in possession of 3 first-class relics through the Newman Club of Los Angeles, which was started in 1899 and has met every month for 126 years now. And we, Mr. Padilla and I, will be going to meet with Archbishop Gomez, because he has to separate our 3 hairs into 3 reliquaries. And this exhibit I will be offering to any host who wants to have veneration, and a bishop has to approve that we will bring Newman's first-class relic for veneration in their cathedral or their church or their college. So I forgot to mention, this is going to go to USC. As well, to the Catholic Center at USC. So, thank you. John Michael told me he would have a question for me, and he does.
So why is St. John Henry Newman the perfect doctor of the time we live in?
Well, because he went through everything that modernity has thrown at us. Doubt. René Descartes changed the approach of knowing from St. Anselm's "I believe, therefore I think," or "therefore I credo et intelligere," I believe, therefore I seek wisdom. He turned that on its head to the cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, and I doubt everything else. And you can't go from doubt to faith. You can only go from faith further. Doubt will not lead you to the truth. It will actually hamper you from getting to the truth. You actually have to accept things to be able to think for yourself. You can't doubt everything. So Newman went through that. He went through the problem of emotionalism and relativism, the evangelical spirit of resting in a strongly emotional creed and not being fully sacramental. He knew that God was behind the veil, and evangelicalism wouldn't get him there. And so everything that you would face as a modern person, he went through it, and he got through it, and he wrote how to get through it, and he helped people get through it, and he taught in a brilliant way, and he wrote in a brilliant way. No one was a better prose stylist or homilist than Newman in the whole of the modern period, I would say.
So my question is, especially for the education of young people, in a culture where we learn from sources such as media, where we learn from educational institutions that are pretty progressive and woke, as we say, what lessons can we as Catholic laity, can the Catholic Church as an institution, and also educators in secular institutions as well, draw from Henry Newman in order to sort of advance our Catholic knowledge and beliefs?
Excellent, thank you. So in the idea of a university, first of all, we have to have our own houses in order to be the patterns and models for students and friends that are worthy of imitation as we imitate Christ. So that's first. First and foremost, get your own, every teacher should have their own house in order and be, fired up for the truth and be able to account for it, the hope in you, as St. James says. And then on the intellectual side, one of Newman's great contributions was understanding the integrity of knowledge, that specialization is a problem, that knowledge is a whole with a bunch of parts that are interrelated in a way that if you take religion out of that equation, science magnifies beyond its appropriate bounds and becomes kind of a monster. So if you don't have everything in the circle of knowledge in its own place, in proper relation, and so God created the world as intelligible for us as intelligent creatures to be able to know it and love it and come to Him in one way through that, as the finger of God is seen in His making, in His creation. So if you don't have an understanding of the integral character of knowing, which is mirroring the integral character of your soul, which is having your religious, moral, and intellectual life in proper order, then you won't become a good student, a good teacher, or a good model. So he helps tremendously on both of those, and his idea of a university still is the best roadmap for, although our new book is pretty good.
And things such as like the American higher education, or especially in like secular society or secular universities.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of universities around America, we have Newman centers there. Other than, and I imagine that it kind of advances this idea of while you're learning your science, and whatever else you're studying, you also get to learn about Catholicism. Are there any other institutional ways that to go and reach more young Americans and young people and bring these ideas to them?
Yeah. So just on the subject of Newman centers, they're very uneven. Some of them are good, some of them are not, and they aren't an organization as such. But there are some very good ones if they've come out of the Catholic Studies movement, like the one in Lincoln, Nebraska, that Bishop Conley helped get going. That's a phenomenal Newman Center. Another one is in Phoenix, where the University of Mary, when my mentor Don Briel was the chair of the Newman's, held the Newman chair there, he started a Newman Center at ASU, where you can get a UMary degree or an ASU degree and live in community with other Catholics. So I think it is that ancillary, having a house of studies, having a house dedicated to Catholic culture, of living the faith, those help a lot. But as far as a major organization, we're trying to help with that, and there are a number of others. The Institute for Catholic Liberal Education trains teachers in this way. Circe, which is an Orthodox group, trains both Catholic and Orthodox and Protestant, classical Christian schools. And there's a whole movement within the classical school renewal that should have that. Homeschooling helps that. So, but a lot of those, to step back, a lot of those places have to go away. Higher education, some things are lost. The Ivies, I would say, could go away, and I think the president is taking a shot at that. We need to get back to Catholic education that is not based on on career training as an end. And get back to living the intellectual and moral and religious life as Santiago is trying to do it. If other institutions do that, more great things will happen.
Professor Lessard, would you agree that smaller colleges may be the better way to go in terms of educating at least people at the undergraduate level?
Yeah. Yes, Thomas Aquinas College, Wyoming Catholic, which I'm most familiar with, Dallas, Franciscan, Christendom. There is, if we take Newman's example, Newman is in a college that's inside a university. So if we just get back to the college principle, where it is a matter of a tutorial, a personal influence of a tutor and a student or a group of students, you can still have something within a larger university. And Catholic Studies started that way at St. Thomas and St. Paul. But it had its own dedicated building, it had its own floor for students to live on, and it had a campus in Rome where they could go and immerse themselves in Catholic life for a whole semester. And that made a huge difference. So yes, small is good, but the college principle can really help within the larger institutions.
All right, let's hear it for Dr. Lessard.
Thank you.